Hello.
Hey Robert.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, good. How are you?
Doing all right? Doing well. So what are we talking about tonight?
I have the collected works of Enoch the Prophet edited by Zen Garcia, and then I also have the books of Enoch by Joseph B. Lumpkin. So both of them have one, two, and three, third Enoch in them. So like what, but I know we're gonna read first Enoch. So if you want to just go into certain parts of Enoch that you want to read, like a chapter or certain verses that, and then go into what, each verse means
Well,
and
okay.
whatnot. So go ahead.
Okay, so I guess the thing is we can kind of skip some of the prerequisites because I know that the people who'd be watching this is probably the people who have been watching all along, so I don't have to go back to square one every time. We've
Right.
already established that it is a central teaching to the apostles, or so we have discovered, I suppose, in of course Second Peter and Jude, that they believed in the book of Enoch. They believed that it was ancient, that it was authentic, that it was in fact relevant to their day and to the future. And essentially, when you get down to Jude 14, in just a very matter of fact way, Jude inserts Jesus actually into Enoch 1:9. And that's an important thing to realize is that they were retrojecting Jesus into the book of Enoch. And so this is what happens when you take that ball and you run with it, so to speak. Because now you have Jesus as the actual protagonist of the book of Enoch, and that changes the way you read the book of Enoch. That's sort of the next step. That's sort of the next realization is when you understand that, oh, so this was taught by the apostles that Jesus Christ was in fact that Son of Man, that Messiah figure.
Right.
And so it's one thing to think that, it's one thing to feel that, but it's another thing to see that, and one of the things I've always focused on is it's good to know things, but it's better to be able to think because you can transcend knowledge if you can think. But it's better still to see because seeing has to do with the way things actually are. And I doubt you're going to improve on the way things are set up. And so if you tie yourself to direct perception and direct knowledge, you're doing yourself a considerable favor and a tremendous leap forward in your understanding because you've detached. If you understand what I'm saying, you understand that you can throw out the religious baby with the religious bathwater because it's all something that you see through. And once you recognize it, then you're no longer distracted by it. You're no longer fooled by it. It becomes something of a phantom. And so, what I wanted to do is I wanted to take a look at least at the parable section, the
Sure.
similitudes.
Mhm.
In light of what it says in Enoch 1, of course, and 104 and 105, which are real basic sort of mainstays. What happens when you realize and recognize that when Jesus says, for example, when you see the Son of Man coming, on the clouds of heaven, you
Right.
know, with his angels and stuff like that. Now he's speaking of the Son of Man and himself as the same person. And so he speaks of himself in third person. So there's a meaning that is latent within the New Testament of just what is the parable here? What is the actual Son of Man figure, right? Now, people have been saying for a long time that, of course, Enoch and Christianity had a lot to do with one another, and that early Christians, in fact, did seem to consider Enoch to be a prophet. You read about him in Barnabas, you read about him in, the Testaments, the 12 patriarchs, and elsewhere. I mean, he's well attested to in his time during the early
Yeah.
Christian age. And what we're here to demonstrate, I think, and actually demonstrate, to actually show, and that's what I wanted to get into, is how do we show this? Because this is when you realize what it's saying and you realize that this is what's actually going on, you can understand the convergence of technology. You can understand the convergence of, you know, In some ways, it's a lot like Babylon's Return. Everybody can speak the same language because functionally, language and even the way your lips move and stuff can be changed by translation now, almost in real time. People around the world could who speak not at all your language can understand you talking almost in real time. And we got into a real watershed moment where the truth can be universal and sudden. And news doesn't just travel fast, it can travel instantaneously and across national borders and across language borders and so on and so forth. We're living in kind of a unique time. And it might be a short time too. I mean, there may be time, when controls and tighter grasps on these kinds of technologies will come down and bear on our situation. And so again, I think time is a little bit of the essence. It seems to indicate that. And I would think that common sense would dictate that if you know the secret and you know the mystery, it's because you're meant to do something with it, and you're meant to disclose it at that time. Shout it from the rooftops.
Yep.
But we can just kind of dive right in. I like to read from the texts themselves because you're not losing information, and for me, it's helpful because my brain is all over the place, and a lot of times I'm conflating ideas. I mean, it's good because I can see connections, and maybe not so good because I lose some of the method.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
read
I
something and
understand.
you stick to the actual words, what I'd like to do is just color this with that understanding. For those of you out there who know what we're talking about, understand that yes, Jesus is the protagonist of the book of Enoch according to the New Testament. According to, first of all, the Epistle of Jude, really short read, one chapter. He says that Enoch wrote that book in the seventh from Adam, seventh generation from Adam, right? And that it was prophecy and that it was directed towards the people who were infiltrating the church at the time. And the
Mhm.
quote he gives, he inserts the word Lord. In the original book of Enoch, it says, "And behold, he cometh with 10,000s of his saints," right? And so
Mhm.
it's referring to stuff that was earlier in the chapter. Um, the Lord of Spirits and all that, the Holy Great One, is what he's referencing. But Jude does something very interesting, is that he actually says that he inserts the word Lord into
Mhm.
that. And so now there is the key to that parable. That's the actual rubric with which you understand the whole rest of the
Mhm.
book of Enoch. It's deliberately put into that phraseology to
Yep.
inform you that Jesus is, in fact, the Messiah figure, the
Mhm.
Son of Man figure, the righteous and elect one figure that you were
Mhm.
reading about in the book of Enoch. So when you read about it in the book of Enoch, Jude is telling you that it is our Lord. And actually, Peter in Second Peter 1:16 reinforces this by saying that when we told you about the power and coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, which is Enoch 1:9,
Yeah.
behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints to execute judgment, right? He
Right.
cometh with power, right? His power and his coming. He cometh, right? So that tracks, and that his power is that he has the power to judge. So that tracks. And so you understand. And you can also understand and infer from the fact that the accusation against his prophecy of his coming in power was that it was a cleverly concocted fable and that it came from the mind of man. Now, what book would they say that had to do with the power and coming of our Lord Jesus Christ would the canonizers, let's say, or the academics at the time say was cleverly concocted or that came from the mind of man? Right? It would have to be in this context the book of Enoch. And so it's perfectly understandable that the entire controversy of the early church was defining Jesus in Enochian terms. And
Yep.
evidently, and I say evidently, not apparently or whatever, because the evidence that they leave you is overwhelming. He says
Yeah.
in Peter that this letter is for those of you who have received a like faith as what we have. And so
Right.
you ask the question, what is their faith like? Their faith is that Jesus, and Peter actually uses those words. When we told you about the power and coming of what? Our Lord Jesus Christ. He is
Right.
Christologizing that verse maximally our Lord Jesus Christ, right? That's what four words that he devotes to that
Yeah,
to reinforce that Jesus is in fact the protagonist of the book of Enoch. You get that straight from the Bible. And so
right.
what has happened is the church is that this is the actual this is the actual judgment, and that is that we have negated God's plain words. Nothing about what we're talking about is hidden. That's the amazing thing. There's nothing hidden about it. It's every bit of it is open and as straightforward and as plain as it possibly can be. And so when you recognize that that's what the apostles were fighting for, that was in fact the hill that Peter was dying on, right? Was that recognition that in fact Enoch was prophetic and holy scripture. That's what he's actually saying. So I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
Oh, actually, I was just gonna talk about how, like, I was just reading ahead a little bit in Enoch, and I don't know if you had mentioned where we're gonna start in Enoch. I guess we're starting probably at the beginning, but um, in the first book of Enoch, in my version from Joseph B. Lumpkin, it
Hmm.
says that like when you get down to verse chapter 1 verse 7, it tells you that it matches Revelation 21 7 through 8, and then it goes on to tell you it matches Revelation again. Then obviously Enoch 1 9, it has Jude 1 14 through 15 right below it, showing you that that matches that. So like all throughout this whole entire book, it shows you where it matches in the canon. So like for instance, Enoch, think this is, hold on one second. Yeah, Enoch chapter 2, verse 5. Therefore shall you curse your days, and the years of your life shall perish, and the years of your destruction shall be multiplied, and in an eternal curse you shall find no mercy, which matches Deuteronomy 11:26 through 28. See, I am setting before you today a blessing and a curse. The blessing, if you obey the commands of the Lord your God that I am giving you today. The curse, if you disobey the commands of the Lord your God and turn from the way that I have commanded you today by following other gods which you have not known. So, anyways, it's just like all throughout Enoch, it matches both the Old Testament and the New Testament, which that's when Jesus said, remember, it's like taking something old, but it becomes new because it becomes new to like our knowledge. You know what I mean? So go ahead, Robert. I just wanted that's kind of the stuff I wanted to talk about is that, but also uh, that kind of stuff, how it matches, not necessarily that way, but just so people know that it does match. But we're going to talk about the spiritual aspect of it, which is the keys, which I wanted to break into maybe possibly chapter 2, verse 1, where Enoch starts to say, observe everything that takes place in the sky, how the lights do not change their orbits, and the luminaries in the heavens. And then it goes on to say things, but most of it's written in keys. Like it talks about summer and winter, and it talks about like the water and the clouds and like all those different keys that we talk about throughout, that we've shown in Peter and Jude and all the different books. So go ahead, you can go where you want with it. That's what I want to talk about eventually, so you can go where you want with it.
Okay, well, first of all, a lot of this stuff has been known and has been published. It's very strange how um, we've had this book for centuries now,
Right.
um, and it exists in the public domain, or at least the older versions of it do.
Yeah.
And then we've had several lifetimes to look at this book and to actually study this book. But more so than just the study of this book, we have had this book in conjunction with Second Peter and Jude, for these centuries as well. And I guess the real question is why haven't Christians just put two and two together? And this this goes to show you that how thought through this entire plan has been.
Mhm.
That there would be a time of ignorance and whatnot, and that eventually this knowledge would hit us, right? And so this is sort of the I guess the return of that knowledge, and
Yeah.
we are. we are bound as Christians who have come into this knowledge to share the knowledge. It says, reveal it to them with your wisdom in Enoch 105, right? For ye are their guides and reward upon the earth, as if to say that you're a blessing to it. And Second Peter informs us that we can speed his coming. So with this knowledge coloring our interpretation, I guess, of the parables, then I guess it's no great mystery to know that the actual parable that's involved here is that the Enochian Messiah is in fact Jesus Christ. And
Right.
so when you read about the messianic figure in the book of Enoch, Jude is telling you, Peter is telling you, they're invoking James. Jude is invoking James in this, right? Peter is invoking Paul. He's saying Paul writes the same way in all of his letters. So they attribute it to the apostles as a whole, including Jude and James, brothers of Jesus. So there's the familial connection, and then of course there is Peter, who is of course regarded by some as even the chief apostle, but
Hmm.
of great significance nonetheless, right? Literally telling you that our Lord Jesus Christ will come in accordance with Enoch 1:9 and is in fact the central figure of Enoch 1:9. So when you read the parables, all right, you've got the answer up front that in fact this is all leading to Jesus Christ within the parables, right?
Hmm.
So starting with 37, um, there's a little preamble. It says the second vision which he saw, the vision of wisdom which Enoch, the son of Jared, the son of Mahalalel, Canaan, Enos, and Seth and Adam saw, right? That's six, and then one, that's the seventh from Adam. And he and this is the beginning of the words of wisdom. So this little tome here is called the words of wisdom, which I lifted up my mouth, my voice to speak and say to those who dwell on the earth. Now, when you come across a verse like I lifted up my voice, right? What it means is that he's speaking in a higher register. He's talking on two levels. And so his voice is literally raised up to a higher level. So he's telling you that he's speaking parabolically. And he says, and I lifted up, and again, this is the book of parables, so it makes sense, right? But these are little signposts that you look for when you read says, I lifted up my voice to speak and say to those which dwell on the earth. And so we talked about dwelling on the earth. They're those that live in heaven, right? Those are the people whose hearts and minds and thoughts are drawn up to the higher level and understand things on in the deeper sense, right? The
Right.
spiritual meaning. And sometimes it's really simple. You just put the word spiritual in front of it. You're going to heal someone's physical blindness. That's mankind's spiritual blindness being healed. And if you can understand that, then you recognize it, and you recognize it, you get it. And if you get it, you got it, right? So you become elect, you change, you transform in your thinking, you be transformed and renewed in your mind, right? And it says, hear ye the men of old time, and see ye that come after. So the hearing is first, that's faith. Faith
Hmm.
comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God, right? But knowledge comes um, from virtue, because again the path to true knowledge is to add virtue to your faith, right? So if for example you're reading Enoch and negating, or Jude, I'm sorry, and negating him along the way, then you're avoiding um the virtue, if you will, of crediting him for his words, right? And so
Right.
there's no virtue in it. So the knowledge lies behind virtue, in that if you're willing to credit Jude when he says that Enoch wrote it, if you're willing to credit him when he says that he was a prophet, that he spoke of these people who were entering into the church, mind you, the people who were entering the church were making the accusation that the book of Enoch is a cleverly concocted fable. That's exactly the same position that the church takes to this day.
Right.
So the church and the villains who crept into the church are actually just the same lineage. They have exactly the same epistemological view, in that the book of Enoch is a cleverly concocted fable from the mind of men. They teach consistently that the book of Enoch is Second Temple literature and is a pseudepigraphal writing, a cleverly concocted fable, but a fable nonetheless. And that the subtext of what you're reading in Jude and Peter is that the apostles had become persona non grata for their defense of this book and their unity in preservation of this book and the fact that they were teaching that Jesus was in fact the central figure of this book. And that was just a bridge too far for the canonizers and the people who wanted the 24 books to be what was authoritative and did not regard the book of Enoch to be authoritative and thus regarded the apostles as foolish for believing them, and that they chastise them and they say, "Where is this coming?" Right? In other words, what are they talking about? You're saying that this is prophesied in Enoch. This has been going on a long time. Ain't nothing happened.
Okay, but
You know.
Robert, can I just say one thing though? Can I just say
Uh-huh.
one thing? Maybe this is totally obvious, and I'm just saying this like dumbly, but if we could say that we could say whatever we want about Enoch, right? We could say people did whatever they wanted to with Enoch and whatever, right? Over the course of history. But what about the disciples though? Like even the disciples, just themselves. Where's the books of Thomas? Where's the books? Like for instance, right? Jesus picked 12 people to be the people that would go out and preach to the world, right? Where's their books, right? Like we have them, but we don't allow them. You see what I'm saying? So like if we don't allow the Didache, we don't allow the Acts of Thomas, we don't allow the Acts of Andrew, we don't allow for the Acts of Thecla and what the other, you know what I mean? Like all these other books that are the stories of the people that Jesus chose in his own time, we don't allow those books. So obviously they're not going to allow the book of Enoch, who is one of the two witnesses. You know what I mean? Like we're in the end times. We're in the end times. They're never good. You know what I mean? Like of course they're not going to allow that stuff because they don't allow anything that doesn't fit their own narrative where they're the
Well,
leaders and stuff.
okay. So then we'll get to that because actually that's where this whole chapter is leading. So
Sure,
let's
sure.
pick up
Sorry.
where we left off. It says, "Hear
Go
ye
ahead.
men of old time, right? And see ye that come after the words of the Holy One, which I will speak before the Lord of spirits. It were better to declare them only to the men of old time, right, which is antediluvian time,
Yeah.
but even from those that come after, that is to say, at the end of time, right, those who will be living in the day of tribulation when the wicked and the godless are to be removed, that we will not withhold the beginning of wisdom, and that would be the elect too at the early Christian age, right? And what is the beginning of wisdom? Till the present day, such wisdom has never been given by the Lord of spirits as I have received according to my insight. And that's important because what is his insight? We've been talking about it, right? His insight is that this Messiah, the, he that he was prophesying a coming Messiah, and that as it kind of explains a little bit later, that towards the end of time, people will come to understand and to recognize what he's done. He says that um, till the present day, such wisdom has never been given by the Lord of spirits as I have received according to my insight, according to the good pleasure of the Lord of spirits, by whom the lot of eternal life has been given to me. Now, three parables were imparted to me, and I lifted up my voice again and recounted them to them those that dwell on the earth. So again, he's indicating to you that he's speaking in parables because he's lifted up his voice, and
Yeah.
that he's speaking to those who dwell on earth with the idea that their thinking can approach his. That, in other words, they're to lift up their ears so that they can hear that exalted voice and no longer be those who dwell on the earth. In other words, they will be those among those who will dwell in heaven if they
Mhm.
understand what he's talking about. What is his insight then? Right? Because he tells you that he's got an insight. And he says, the first parable, when the congregation of the righteous shall appear, right? That's going to be those who come at the end of time, right? He talks about that first thing in the book of Enoch, not for his generation, but for a remote one, which is for to come concerning the elect. And it says that is a blessing wherewith he blessed the elect and righteous. So this is the congregation. Right. So it jumps from basically the first part of Enoch 1 down to here. It says the coming of the judgment of the wicked. First parable, when the congregation of the righteous shall appear, and sinners shall be judged for their sins and shall be driven from the face of the earth. And again, to be driven from the face of the earth, if you think about it, the it's not just the superficial aspect. It's more like the way of the world, right? The idea
Yeah.
is that the world is one way here, there, and everywhere throughout time. It's different here, it's different there throughout space and time. But their entire way of life is about to be removed. We're about to achieve a new kind of life, and that's what this is getting to. That they shall be driven from the earth. But first, the wicked have to be bound, right? And then burned, right? In Thomas, it says the strong man has to be bound first, and then you can plunder his house, right? The strong man is the one who takes it by force, right? Which
Mhm.
is the kingdom, which is by falsehood and by enforcing a false canon, a false paradigm, right? Which the apostles absolutely did not believe, nor did they adhere to. And they preached against by telling you that the book of Enoch, again, is not a cleverly concocted fable, but it is but prophets of old spake as they were moved, it says, by the Holy Spirit. So they were running this whole counter argument against this counter Enoch movement. And again, everybody imagines this synagogue of Satan as being these evil cartoon villains, and they're some of them were. Some of them were, I'm not gonna lie, some of them were. The idea that Judas knew where Jesus would be, right, and betrayed that to the religious authorities. Um, the idea that something that was known to him was part of the betrayal, that he would lead them to him, and Jesus waited there for him, right? This is a prelude because what's happening is that these Judas priests are coming in and that they already know that the canon worked before. They already understand that you turn these people's spirits into little bonsai trees with barely any kind of faith at all, when in fact the tree is supposed to be so large, what I'm saying, that it even accommodates the birds and their nests and stuff. The idea is that large things come from small packages, right? So understanding these clues, understanding these fundamental things will open up a whole new world because again, you have to lift up your ears so that you can hear his lifted up voice, right? He says,
Right.
and it says, and the sinners shall be judged for their sins and be driven from the face of the earth. So in other words, the earth is not no longer going to be in their image, right? It's going to
Mhm.
be a whole new arena. Their era is gone. And it says, and when the righteous one shall appear before the eyes of the righteous, whose elect works hang upon the Lord of spirits. Now, the idea is that how is it that the righteous one is appearing before the eyes of the righteous? If it has to do with the eyes of the understanding, how has his paradigm transformed when you understand that it was the actual apostolic teaching from the very first that Jesus was, in fact, the protagonist of this book? And
Mhm.
people would understandably ask why. But the entire purpose of this book being written was to be revealed at some future time when the people would understand it and be able to explain it. So if it's possible to understand it and it's possible to explain it and it is possible to reveal it to the world, that means we have an assignment. That means we have a job. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? That means that if we are workers in his employ, and hope to look him in the face someday, we don't want to be the kind of workers that aren't out there in the field, bringing in the sheaves. And anyway,
Yeah.
so their works hang upon the Lord of the spirits, right? Why? Because you understand it now as Enochian, right? Now their works hung upon the Lord of the spirits. Their works hung upon the understanding that Jesus was the Enochian Christ. That's the hill that Peter died on. That's the hill that Jude died on. I mean, these people went to Jude and were like, "You can't possibly be teaching this. You can't possibly. This is where is this power incoming that you're talking about, right?" Again, Enoch 1:9. Where is it? Right? Where is it? And you guys have been promising this for a long time, right? You've never delivered on this promise. He hasn't come, right? You guys believe in this book that it's outside of the Mosaic teaching, right? It's so easy to understand once you see it. They had a genuine what was in their minds, at least the minds of the people who believe that lie, right? Because that mark is either in their forehead or in their right hand. They're either acting on it or they're believing it, right? But it's one or the other. But some of these people are acting on it. And those are the more nefarious ones. Those are the ones that are more like Balaam. Those are the ones that are more like Cain, who are willing to kill his brother, or you know what I'm saying, or
Yeah,
Korah,
but
which is to rebel
isn't it?
against God's order.
Isn't it called like apologetics when you like defend a book or like defend what a book says? Like for instance, like apologetics on Paul would be like oh, like defending like Paul says this and like oh, we're defending what he's saying because he really means this or whatever according to what they teach you in seminary or whatever, right?
Well,
So
this is a
I
little meta.
yeah, but
I mean,
you don't hear anyone ever doing any apologetics about the Book of Enoch, though. You don't, there's nobody out there like right now that's out there saying, oh, well, Enoch really meant this, like because he was, you know what I mean?
well,
Like there's
because
nothing
because
defending him. There's nothing.
because well, I mean, think about what sort of lies behind that presumption. Why is nobody doing it? Because anybody who does it is on their own, to say the least, right?
Right.
These people, the institution, and we just talked about the downfall of the institution when the righteous one shall appear. So when your paradigm shifts and you understand that the Jesus that they taught was kind of the Jesus Barabbas, the earthly Jesus, right?
Yeah.
There was an inversion there because they weren't letting you know what the apostles actually taught, and because that truth was, again, the structure of it is you either believe the apostles or you believe men, right? The Bible instructs you very clearly, follow his commandments, right? Let God be true and every man a liar. So if you run it into a situation where men are saying that God is the liar, they're giving the lie to Jude, right? They're giving the lie to Peter, right? When you see them doing that, right? What are you instructed to do? Let God be true and every man a liar. It's as plain as that. And so if you just say, okay, well, I'm going to let God be true here, I'm going to let Jude say what he's saying. That's it. There's nothing hidden. There's nothing mysterious. It is as open and as simple and as obvious and as straightforward as it can possibly be. And that's part of the judgment, because what can you say on judgment day in your own defense? I mean,
Nothing.
he'd ask you very plainly, did I not tell you that this was ancient? Did I not tell you that it was authentic? Did I not tell you that it was prophetic? You know what I'm saying? Where's all of this, questioning me coming from? You know what I'm saying? I can understand what he could say on that day,
Yeah, but
what is possible to say.
I think that a lot of the reason that they hid our origins by hiding like the first book of Adam and Eve and all these other books is because if you read the first book of Adam and Eve and that and all that stuff, where then you realize Enoch is part of the story. Like Enoch and Noah like actually interacted and stuff like that, and Adam and Enoch interacted, and like all this stuff was passed down to us through the flood. What was passed down to us through the flood? All these books plus the fact that there was giants on the earth. Well, where'd the giants come from? Oh, the giants were created by the fallen angels in Genesis 6. So like then your canon makes sense because like it brings you back to the beginning. And like honestly, I, I can't tell you what it's like going through Christian school your whole entire life, and they never tell you where the whole like what happened to Adam and Eve, like the real
Well,
stuff
but see,
that happened to them. Like that's
but
wrong.
well,
That's really wrong. Because then you start to think like that
well,
maybe that then you start to believe the evolution stuff because like oh yeah we evolved from apes because you don't know where you really came from. You don't even know who you really are. Like, why did we fall? Why did we fall? Like, nobody knows anything really if you don't understand like what happens in the Book of Enoch. To be honest, it's true. You don't really know what you are, or who you are, or your purpose unless you read the Book of Enoch. It's just how I feel, and I'm not just saying that to plug it. I just feel like it's true. You know what I mean? It opens up all the other books and all the reasons why this happened and why
the
Jesus did what he did. Everything.
the way that you would know anything is by having eyes to see and ears to hear. Are they speaking in this parabolic language? Are they aware of this? Because
Yeah.
this is something God, okay, when Peter credits Paul for writing in his books about these things, he says that Paul
Writes
writes
the
in
same in
his
all of
books,
his
all of
writings.
his books, writing in them according to wisdom that is given to him by God, right? Writing in them of these things. And so if he's talking about the book of Enoch and he's talking about the Assumption of Moses and he's talking about books beyond the canon of the 24, the canon is the thing that substitutes for the truth. It
Yeah, I
sits
know,
in
but
the
bro,
place, but the knowledge
I
that you're
asked
talking
ChatGPT
about,
I asked
but
Chat GPT this the other day though, and they regurgitated to me the online answer from all of religiosity in the the scholarly seminary world, which the answer that you always get back when you say so, like that Paul or any other prophet in the Bible or like disciple or whatever, and whenever they give credit to other books, like the book on the War of the Lords or whatever that they mention in the Book of Numbers or whatever, the whatever the other books are that they mention in the Bible that are not canonical or whatever. The answer for that is, oh, they are not giving credit to those books. They're just mentioning them like as if they were mentioning like the works of Plato or something like that, because they say that Paul mentioned something to do with like other Greek books or something because he was a scholar or something. You know what I'm
Well,
saying? They always give
that's
some
because
crap
well
answer. It's never a good
they're
answer, is all I'm saying. Sorry, go ahead.
they're well, I mean they're programmed by men, but I mean that's
Right,
just
right,
that
right. That's what I mean.
those are well, I mean again, those are external kind of things. At the time that Jude or whoever is writing it, right? They're trying to create a a trail of breadcrumbs for you to follow, right? So
Right,
that you can return to the faith that they gave you and that you can have your faith restored. And what I'm
right. The door
trying
that
to,
open
well,
door.
because it's about remembrance. I want you to
Mhm.
recall the words that were spoken. I want you to remember these things. That Peter tells you plainly. He says that this book is for those who have come to a like precious faith as what we have. Right.
Right.
And then he explains to you that I will tell you these things, even though I know you, that meaning his present congregation, the one in his room or whatever that he preaches to right there in his presence. He
Mhm.
says that you know them and you are already established in them.
Right.
So the people of that age, he's telling you that faith was something that they knew and that they were established in. He's establishing that his church and that what he taught, right, had to do with what he is also defending, which is the book of Enoch. We did not follow cleverly concocted fables when we told you about the power and coming, right?
Right, but
Who's
what?
we?
So like
Evidently him and Jude.
basically he's only saying it out loud like in the text so that he can say like I know you guys all know this, but I'm just saying it for the people in the future so that they
Yeah,
can
and
remember.
that's okay, and that's where and see that's where we're at. It says okay, so the righteous one shall appear before the eyes of the righteous. In other words, they're going to recognize the Enochian Christ. They're going to
Mhm.
understand the parable. Okay, and it says when he shall appear, and then the elect works hang upon the who the elect works hang upon the Lord of the spirits. In other words, they're Enochian in origin, right? And a
Mhm.
light shall appear to the righteous and the elect who dwell on the earth. Again, they're going to be raised up from their earthly thinking because the light, again, is going to appear to them, right? And until it appears to them, they dwell on the earth, right? So they're going to be
Mhm.
changed. And it says, and where will the dwelling place of the sinners be and the resting place of those who have what? Denied the Lord of spirits, have told you that he was not the Enochian Christ, even though they had centuries to work that out, even at the end, right?
Right.
So that he gave us time to come clean early, and then Enoch was not, for God took him, and then it's to be restored, right? It is for a future generation, for the removal of the wicked and the ungodly. And Jude tells you these people are the wicked, these people are the ungodly. Those are the ones Enoch spoke of. And he tells you that very literally, very straightforward, not at all in a hidden way. And yet we have twisted it and have denied it and have given the lie to Jude and given the lie to Peter and thereby given the lie to the Holy Spirit, given the lie to God. You know what I'm saying? That's going to be a
Yes, I
pretty
do.
tough sell if there's going to be a judgment day based on this work.
What chapter and verse are you on next?
Well, it's going to be 38 or yeah, 38 well, we're still at 38 too,
32.
right?
Okay.
Reversification may vary. I know with the Lawrence and a few others are different. It says when the dwelling places of the sinners, where will they be, and where the resting place of those who have denied the Lord of spirits? Again, those who have denied the Lord of spirits are very specifically those who have denied that the apostles taught an Enochian Christ, right? And
Mhm.
that's gone on for these 2,000 years. So that's the whole age, right? And then it
Yep.
says, it had been good for them if they had not been born. Again, the Judas imagery, right? It would have been good for that man who betrays the Son of Man, right? The Enochian Jesus, right? It would be good for that person if he had not been born. You see what I'm saying? So, in other
Yep.
words, who was willing to diverge that to his enemies, divulge that? Who was willing to tell them, you know what I'm saying, where he stood in his inner teaching, right? And where he would be,
Mhm.
right? Would be the Judas to betray him. And so they understand that if the whole teaching of Jesus is that he's busting the canon, he's destroying the canon of the 24 by proclaiming himself to be the Enochian Messiah, ergo outside of the 24, and that's what he's teaching his apostles behind
Right,
closed
because that's
doors.
what no, because that's what he was teaching the disciples. That's what he taught Thomas, and Thomas said in the book of Thomas, in the sayings of Thomas, it says Jesus said to the disciples, or they said to him, 24 elders spoke in Israel, and all of them were speaking of you. And he said, you speak of the dead when the living one is in front of you. So Jesus, as the fullness of the word by the three testaments, or the three dispensations of the fullness, that represents what Jesus was saying to the disciples, which was, I am the living one, meaning he is the life, the fullness. But they were mentioning the dead thing, which is the 24, the concept of the 24, the canon is a dead thing. He was saying that's a dead thing. I'm the living thing, because they didn't understand the fullness of it yet. Because he was talking to them like early in
Well,
their walk in the
but
canon. Sorry, I'm choking.
this is designed to bring you life, right? It alternates between the blessings of the righteous and the curses upon the unrighteous, and it sort of alternates here. It says, "But where will be the dwelling of the sinners?" Think about what that means, though. If they've lied to you for 2,000 years, and demonstrably so, and if the lie was something that wasn't some hidden thing that you could maybe say, well, maybe they couldn't have known that, right? And maybe cut them some slack. The fact is that 100% they had to deny what was spoken. They had to actually negate the prophets in this particular sense, and so they have therefore denied the Lord of Spirits. And it says, "And when the secrets of the righteous shall be revealed, and the sinners judged," right? Why? Because your knowledge destroys their error. Their teaching for 2,000 years is undermined by their own teaching. They just don't know it because they don't possess the key. They don't possess the insight anymore. That's been lost. And if it hasn't been lost, then they haven't disclosed that they known it, right? Which means that they're still guilty. It says, "When the secrets of the righteous shall be revealed and the sinners judged, and the godless driven from the presence of the righteous and elect," right? Well, then that's a mouthful because what's happening is that the righteous and elect are able to articulate what they could not articulate. They're able to expose what they did for 2,000 years. And of course, they won't have any way out of it. They won't have any way to redeem themselves, really.
Yeah,
And
but
so
I
they'll
think you
be
mentioned this
driven.
before. Didn't you mention this in the last show too? Isn't it the verse that says that, but the end is not yet. First, the gospel must be preached. And it says, like, I'll bring you before kings and princes and all these things, and don't prepare what you'll say. It'll be prepared before you, or something like that. And I think that it has to be this. It has to be this, because I mean, like, it's this what we're talking about is something the elect would say. You know what I'm saying? It's got to be this. It's because
Well,
only this is
it's
something
a
that, look, how many people like could even talk about what we're talking about? Like, honestly, there's not a lot of people that know even what we're talking about. There's not that many people. You know what I mean? I can only name a handful, and I know about this stuff. You know what I mean? So it must be something like this that we're
well,
going to teach the kings and princes and stuff like that, because they're going to want to know what it is, because it's going to be happening all around us. I mean, that's what the end times preaches. I mean, if you really, I mean, you read it, you did a whole show on Revelation. I mean, it is metaphorical. But I mean, there is going to be some crazy stuff happening. You know, according to the super gospel, it says a lot of bad stuff's going to happen in the end times. You know what I mean? And a lot of people, I think, are going to feel better when they read the book of Enoch, because it talks about this. You know, it is
well,
a book that gives you some hope. I think, I feel like it does.
well, again, if you just read it straight, like it pretty much goes right through what you're talking about. It says, "When the secrets of the righteous shall be revealed, and the sinners judged, and the godless driven from the presence of the righteous and elect," right? These are the
Right.
wicked and godless that are to be removed, right? On the day of tribulation. See, when the wicked and the godless are to be removed. So now that you know this, we're in the day of tribulation. It says, "From that time, those that possess the earth," right? The kings, the mighty, the exalted, whatever, "shall no longer be powerful and exalted," right? Because they'll have been discredited and undermined by God Himself. And that's a pretty decisive thing against them, especially on account of the fact that it's so in your face obvious when you see it. How could you not have seen it? How could they not have seen it, right? Well, their eyes were being held on the way to Emmaus, so to speak, but we have arrived, is what I'm saying. And so, um, and they shall not be able to behold the face of the holy. For the Lord of spirits has caused his light to appear. So this is going to be likened to the way in which Paul and the people stood up to Stephen, even though Stephen was already in his transformative stage between human and angel. They were
Mhm.
still able to kill him in that circumstance. And this is going to be a similar kind of thing. It says, again, they shall not be able to behold the face of the holy, for the Lord of the spirits has caused his light to appear. And that's another thing too. They will have to be ashamed of the fact that they didn't see it. They'll have to be ashamed of the fact that they denied it, and they should have stood up for it, and they didn't. And it says, "And the kings and the mighty um, shall then perish and be given into the hands of the righteous and holy. And thenceforward none shall seek for themselves mercy from the Lord of spirit, for their life is at an end." Again, um, that they're going to be driven from the face of the earth. In other words, they're not going to be running things anymore. Their time is through, right? And it continues. It says, "And it shall come to pass in those days that elect and holy children will descend from the high heaven, and their seed will become one with the children of men. And in those days Enoch received books of zeal and wrath, and books of disquiet and expulsion." And 104 and 105 reveal how we receive those books, right? Because it says well, I mean, let's read it because this is kind of the magic formula. This is the thing that if you read Jude with this understanding, then you can, yeah, it says, and now I know this mystery. This is 104:10, starting at 10. "And now I know this mystery that the sinners will alter and pervert the words of righteousness in many ways, and will speak wicked words and lie and practice great deceits." Well, the fact that they hid the fact that Jesus was Enochian when it was spoken so openly and plainly testifies really to two things: their wickedness and also God's power to let that happen. Um, and it says, "And they will speak wicked words and lie and practice great deceits, and will write books concerning their words." When they write down truthfully all of my words in their languages, and do not change or diminish aught from my words, but write them all down truthfully, all that I first testified concerning them, then I know another mystery, that books will be given to the righteous and the wise to become a cause of joy and uprightness and much wisdom. And to them shall these books be given, and they shall believe in them and rejoice over them. And then shall all the righteous who have learnt therefrom all the paths of uprightness be recompensed. And in those days the Lord bade them to summon and testify to the children of the earth concerning their wisdom. Remember, this parables is the words of wisdom, right? Show it unto them, for you're their guides and a recompense over the whole earth. For I and my son, right, Jesus Christ, right, will be united with them forever in the paths of uprightness in their lives, and ye shall have peace. Rejoice, you children of uprightness. Amen. So that's whoever takes it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah,
That's
but
for whoever stands up
Rob,
for.
isn't that God the Father talking though? Like right there, isn't
That's what
that
I'm
Enoch?
saying. That's essentially how the book ends. I mean, there's
Yeah, I know,
appendices
but
after that.
what I'm saying is that isn't the way that that's read, doesn't just correct me if I'm wrong, isn't that like sound like it's God the Father and Enoch is quoting him? Because the way he said, can you read that part again? It says, and he and my son, or in my
No,
son
for
and
I and my son. Yeah, no, yeah.
I
He's
and
he's
my
speaking
son.
from
So
God's point of view. Yeah, for I and my son will be united with them
okay, well, that's kind of
forever.
strange. That's kind of strange in and of itself because you don't really hear anything really in the Bible very often, except for like when he talks to Moses, where you hear God the Father like talking like to, you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like that's pretty cool that it's said that way. I and my son. See, it divides it, but it makes it one at the same
Well,
time.
but
See,
see
that's not.
but see, that's Jude and Peter putting Jesus actually as that protagonist. That's the payoff because apart from the appendices, that's how the book ends. And so
Yeah,
if you give any credence to the idea of last things and first things said,
right.
that's certainly one of the last things that's said. It ends on that note. And so it
Hmm.
reinforces the idea that, yes, indeed, he's talking about Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in this particular sense, if you just let it happen. Anyway,
I just wanted to go, I didn't want to skip it, but I just wanted to focus, if possible, on verse 5, that you're like two verses away from it, I think, where it talks about the dew of the earth and whatnot, because I know we talked about that before, and I know you've talked
what?
about how dew is like a metaphor for like the water and how you magnify the water so you can see that, it mentions it many, many times throughout the
Well,
scriptures,
the
how dew
internal
of the,
explanation, yeah, is
yeah.
that um, I forget where I read this. I think it's the Odes of Solomon, where it says that the dew is the mercy of the Lord, and it's
Mhm.
connected. It might be in Enoch too. I think I read that in Enoch too. Um, But I mean, if you want to go over it, I mean, I was gonna kind of go on with the parables, but
No, no, no.
really,
You go where you're going. You go where you're going. I just
let
want
me
to talk
look and
about
see
that
if
at some
there's
point in
a.
the future. It's no problem. I think you're
Let me
on verse
find
three
it.
right now.
Hang on, keep jumping around in here. Um, well, I mean, it's kind of the same sentiment, I mean, apart from the keys, just the whole, you know, he talks about the steadfastness of the Lord and everything, and then how had they have not been steadfast. And
Hmm.
a lot of that imagery has to do with the fact that God's words have been static for 2,000 years and yet they're living, right? They're
Right.
not fixed because they point to something outside of what has been fixed. The canon is something that is quantifiable and fixed and therefore is dead, right? Because what you want is something that can't be spoken and is
Yeah.
alive, right? And
Well,
what can't be
the canon has to
spoken,
do with like orthodoxy, though,
well,
right? Like the Latin for orthodoxy is like basically like their law and their rule or
well,
nothing. Like basically,
well,
it's saying, like it's our club, and if you want to be in our club, then you have to agree to our rules. Basically, that's it. That's what it says.
well, I almost lost my train of thought here, man.
Yeah.
The
Sorry, go ahead, bro.
the thing that's beyond words is what we're talking about here. 2,000 years ago, what these were was words. All right. 2,000 years in the future, these words are retrospective. That means they're not just words. They are meanings. They are histories. They are happenings. They are things that have taken place. And so they transcend the idea of words into something else entirely and something transcendent of words. And so this is why Thomas can mention it, because how do you convey in words what only retrospect could ever show you? In other words, if you're sort of like Christian sleeper cells out there, and that you contain all of this knowledge, right? And you're waiting for the interest to be added to time. The time that interest the interest that time adds, I mean, sorry, to the word that was planted in the earth. In other words, that was concealed in earthly terminology, right? Planted in the earth, right? There's a seed that grows and nobody knows how it grows. It just happens, right? In other words, don't don't think about what you're going to say because you're going to be given the words, right? And you don't know how the thing is going to grow, but it's going to pay off, trust me, right? So there's the passage of time, right? God's deposit earns interest, right? If you go and you take that deposit and you hide it, like if you take the deposit that Jesus is the Enochian Christ and you hide it and you in your little napkin and you come back and you say, well, you know I'm ready to admit this now or something like that. He's not going to accept that from you. You know what I'm saying? So
I'm talking about the parable where the guy buries it in the ground and he says you're not getting nothing, and he gives the rest of it to the other guy or whatever. Talking about that.
yeah, but I mean the thing about it is, okay, so it says that in those days that Enoch received books of zeal and wrath and books of disquiet and expulsion. And again, anyway, so we just talked about how do you get those books. You understand that you get at Enoch by taking Jude and Peter at their words and crediting them for their words. That's all you have to do. And that little bit of virtue is the thing that stands between you and this knowledge. If you are not willing to have the virtue to credit Jude, you will not get to this knowledge, right? That's why you have to add virtue to your faith, right? They don't have the faith that Jude had. They don't have the faith that Peter had, unless and until they have the same faith as what they had. And what was their faith? Their faith was in this book. And you could say, well, this book is a cleverly concocted fable or something. Well, okay, fine. You can go stand with the infiltrators. You could go stand with the ones that they're comparing to Cain and Balaam and Korah. If you feel comfortable standing with those people and their opinions, you know what I'm saying? I mean, that's not what I would do, right? But I mean, that's certainly your prerogative. It says in the Bible, let the filthy be filthy still. You know what I'm saying? You know, you do you. But at the same time, understand that in concealing the truth, you're also sealing your faith. Because you know there are bad things that are happening to these people. It says, "And mercy shall not be accorded to them," saith the Lord of spirits. And in those days, a whirlwind carried me off from the earth, right? And set me down at the end of the heavens, which again, figuratively speaking, that's the end of time. That's the terminus, if you will. And it says, and
Mhm.
there I saw another vision, the dwelling places of the holy, again, who are at the end of time, the elect to come on the day of tribulation when the wicked and the godless are to be removed, right? And here mine eyes saw their dwellings with his righteous angels, and their resting places with the holy. And they petitioned and interceded and prayed for the children of men, and righteousness flowed before them like water and mercy again like dew upon the earth. Thus it is among them forever and ever. I mean, a dew is a lot of things, right? I mean, it does afford you some magnification. If you've ever looked closely at a dewdrop, you do realize that it acts like a magnifying glass. You know, and if you happen to catch something at an angle through a dewdrop that's like hanging or something, you can see flowers, trees, the horizon, whatever image through that dewdrop, right? So there's a lensing effect. I mean, it has a little bit to do with the way that it magnifies the meaning of the word, but it's also refreshing in that it is the word. It's like the word that magnifies what you're reading. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? So dew is a
it's like
form of
it's
water.
actually also light that can cause a fire, and maybe that's what he's talking about. I'm guarding it till it blazes. I don't know.
Well,
That's that's
that
what.
takes some expert skill to do that, but yeah. Anyway, so I mean, it goes on at some length in this vein. It says, and I saw another vision, the holy places, the dwelling places of the holy, and the resting places of the righteous. Again, the many mansions. And there mine eyes saw their dwelling with his righteous angels, and their resting places with the holy. And they petitioned and interceded and prayed for the children of men, and righteousness flowed before them with water, and mercy like dew upon the earth. Again, there's mercy and dew together. That's mercy, like you know, what I'm saying. So the dew is refreshing. You see what I'm saying? So it's comparing God's mercy to that which refreshes. It says, and thus it is amongst them forever and ever. And in that place, mine eyes saw the elect one and of righteousness and of faith, right? And if you sort of see his eyes as looking at Jesus, right?
Mhm.
In that place at the end of heaven and earth, he sees who? The elect one of righteousness and faith, right? So Jude informs us that that elect one is Jesus, our Lord, right?
Right.
And so we insert that there, sort of if Jude is inserting Jesus as the protagonist in Enoch 1:9, then it must be the same elsewhere. And you work with that particular assumption, right? Then
Right.
that's what he's looking at. And it says, and I saw the dwelling places under the wings of the Lord of Spirit, and righteousness shall prevail in his days. And the righteous and elect shall be without number before him, that is Jesus, forever and ever. And all the righteous and elect before him, Jesus, shall be strong as fiery lights, and their mouths shall be full of blessing, right? Because again, it is a blessing of Enoch, right? So in a lot of ways, it'll be full of Enoch, but everything else too, because it doesn't end there for by a long shot. And their lips
Right.
shall extol the name of the Lord of spirits, right? Which is Jesus. And righteousness before him shall never fail, and uprightness shall never fail before him. And there I wish to dwell, and my spirit longed for that dwelling place, that is to say, in communion with the saints at the end of time, where you have the added value, the interest of retrospect that you get from the passage of time that predicted all of this stuff. And now you can look back and you can reflect upon it and recognize that it did come to pass just exactly as it was predicted. And therefore, you're dealing with a power that exists over time and space, and that is God. So you have, it's more than just consonants, right? Like you read in the Gospel of Truth, it's more than just consonants and vowels, right? It has to do with thoughts, and the in this case a realization. It is sort of coming to an awareness that yes, in fact, there is a God, and that yes, he did work over time and space, through the age. You recognize it, you have eyes to see it, right? You hear it in his words, right? He lifts up his voice and you hear it with your ears that you have to hear, your spiritual ears. You see it spiritually in the spiritual landscape in which it's being presented to you. And it says, and in those days I praised and extolled the name of the Lord of spirits with blessings and praises, because he hath destined me for blessing and glory according to the good pleasure of the Lord of spirits. And again, that ties into chapter 1, verse 1, right? Because again, the words of the blessing of Enoch, wherewith he blessed the elect and righteous, who will be living in the day of tribulation when all the wicked and the godless are to be removed, right? And that's what he's saying. In those days, right? The days of the wicked and the godless are to be removed. I praise and extol the name of the Lord of spirits. Again, Jesus, with blessings and praises, because he hath destined me for blessing and glory according to the good pleasure of the Lord of spirits. For a long time my eyes regarded that place, and I blessed him and praised him, saying, Blessed is he, and may he be blessed from beginning and forevermore. And before him there is no ceasing. He knows before the world was created, what is forever and what will come, what will be from generation unto generation, right? And that's important too, because it came from them as a message that was delivered to us, right?
Hmm.
At the end of it. So it was from their generation, right? Again, that ties into what Enoch says in chapter 1. I mean, it literally ties exactly into that. It says, um, but I understood as I saw, but not for this generation, right?
Remote.
From generation to generation, but for remote one, remote what? Generation, right? From generation to generation, right? Which is for to come. Concerning the elect, I said, and took up my parable concerning them. And what is this elect that he's talking about? It's like, um, it says, for a long time, mine eyes regarded that place, right? And I blessed him and praised him, saying, Blessed is he, that may he be blessed from beginning and forevermore. And before him there is no ceasing. And he knows before the world was created what is forever and what will be from generation unto generation, right? So that's from them to us. We are the blessing that he's giving to us, right? He is the blessing he's given to us. He himself, he longs to be with our generation, is what he's saying. And those who sleep not bless and extol, saying, Holy, 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 right? That's testament of the Father, testament of the Son, testament of the Holy Spirit. Revelation 1, Revelation 2, Revelation 3. Holy, 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 right?
Right.
Is the Lord of spirits. He filleth the earth with spirits. And here mine eyes saw all those who sleep not. They stand before him and bless and say, Blessed be thou, and blessed be the name of the Lord forever, which is what? Jesus. And my face was changed, for I could no longer behold. So, what he then has to see, what he then has to witness, he can't witness as a mere mortal or a mere human. He has to be changed, right? And he says, and after that, I saw thousands and thousands and 10,000 times 10,000, and saw a multitude beyond number and reckoning who stood before the Lord of spirits And on the four sides of the Lord of Spirits, I saw four presences different from those that sleep not. And I learned their names. And for the angel who went with me made known to me their names and showed me all the hidden things. And I heard the voices of those four presences as they uttered praises before the Lord of glory. The first voice blesses the Lord of Spirits forever and ever. And the second voice I heard blessing the elect one and the elect ones who hang upon the Lord of Spirits. Right. And so his chosen ones again know who the elect one is. And a third
Yeah,
voice I
but yo,
heard,
you hear that part? Did you hear that part?
the what?
Did you hear that part where it says hang upon the Lord of Spirits?
Yeah.
Whenever it says that hang upon part, I always think of John. You know how John hangs upon Jesus at us and he listens to his heart? You know how he says that? It just reminds me of the elect every time I hear it. I don't know why. I don't know if that does it for
Well,
you too.
that's
But
verse two of the first parable, like 38 2. It says, when the righteous one shall appear before the eyes of the righteous, whose elect works hang upon the Lord of the spirits.
yeah,
And
yeah.
light shall appear to the righteous and the elect who dwell on the earth, right? So that's um it goes around on itself. That's the thing.
Yeah, yeah.
It's something where it's like 108 chapters, right? But a lot of those chapters are saying the same thing and playing off
Mhm.
one another, right? So
Yeah.
it's interesting to see it in its consistency and its applicability within itself and within the it has so heavily influenced the New Testament. It's so heavily influenced the writings of Paul that you know exactly what Peter's talking about when he says he speaks in his letters about these things, because he speaks a lot from Enoch and many others too, so that you get the hint, right?
Well, I mean, Jesus says that. I mean, Jesus says all the time, let God be true and every man a liar, and like he's like says to Thomas, I'm. Oh, what does he say? Says, I'm not a divider, am I? And things like that, and all these different things that Jesus says all the time. You know what I mean? And but in current Christianity, there's a lot of lies. There's a lot of lies because we currently don't. We talk about the two like I don't know if you know
Yeah,
this,
but
Robert, but like we
it,
talk about the two witnesses all the time. We talk about the two witnesses like all the time in Christianity. There's books on it. There's festivals you can go to on it. There's like so many things to talk about the two witnesses, and people still say that it's Moses and Elijah, and it's not. I said it to a pastor before, and he had no idea how to answer me back because he doesn't know the truth. He literally doesn't know it because we don't read the Gospel of Nicodemus, where they tell you that the two, like Enoch and Elijah, literally tell you they're the two witnesses. They say, and we're going to fight the Antichrist at the end of time. Well, we should probably know that. I mean, honestly, it's the truth.
well,
Why don't we?
well, here's the thing. I mean, the answer kind of just basically boils down to that they don't see it the way you see it. They don't
Yeah.
recognize that in its context the way you do. And it always puzzled me the ways in which scholars have written about these books. You look at the footnotes and you looked at the introduction. I've got some really big, like, 5 pound books back here
No,
that
I
have
have
a
it right
lot
here.
of
I
words
have
in
it right here.
there.
Stop. Well, listen, we'll do it right here live on the show. I have my archaeological, look it right here, my archaeological Bible. It has it right in the back. It's the New International Version. I've done it on my own show before. I'll show you real quick. Ready? Book of Jude. It says it right here. I highlighted it on the next page. It says it right here. Okay. See this? On this, it shows you a footnote thing that talks about the book of Jude. And I'm going to read it for you right now. It says, hold on a second. The Bible and pseudepigraphal literature. Pseudepigrapha, if everybody doesn't know, means false. So pseudo means false. So it says Jude, pseudepigrapha, meaning false title, refers to Jewish books that falsely claim to have been written by Moses, Enoch, Abraham, or some other ancient hero of faith. Most pseudepigrapha were written between 250 BC and AD 200. A few examples are as follows: Testament of the 12 Patriarchs, a series of documents claiming to be the testaments of the patriarchs of the tribes of Israel, in which they turn and give exhortations to their descendants. This work was probably written in the 2nd century, but its present form seems to reflect revision by a Christian. The Testament of Solomon, an outlandish tale in which Solomon receives a magical ring from the archangel Michael and uses it to control demons. The book may have been written during blah blah blah. The Testament of Moses, the Psalms of Solomon, Jubilees, and blah blah blah, and it goes on. And then in this, hold on one second. On the side note, it says, one second. I'm trying to find this certain thing. Oh, it says first, Enoch. Early mystics of both Jewish and Christian background were fascinated by Enoch, the man who, after having walked with God, was no more. Genesis 5:24. First Enoch is the first of many accounts detailing Enoch's ascent into heaven. But even this work is a composite of texts written from approximately the 3rd century BC to the 1st century AD. The narrative is highly fantastic in nature. For example, first Enoch 6 through 11 describes the rebellion of the Watchers, the angels who, according to Genesis 6 1 through 4, Jude 6, took the daughters of men to be their wives. In first Enoch 72 through 82, a section referred to as the astronomical book of Enoch, Enoch is given the tour of heavens by the angels Uriel and sees the gates out of which the sun, moon, and the calendar are set. Hold on one second. Oh yeah, and it says, as a rule, the New Testament authors avoided this material, but Jude appears to have made use of it in two places. In verse 9, he alluded to the story concerning Michael and the devil that is found in the version of the Assumption of Moses, as noted by Clement and Origen, and actual text is lost. Also, verse 14, Jude quoted from the first book of Enoch 1:9, see the Lord is coming with 10,000s upon 10,000s of his holy ones. It is possible that through God's providence, some pseudepigrapha have preserved some genuine traditions, and that Jude was able to discern the true from the false. Given the nature of these books, however, it would be perilous to treat them as reliable sources. So they're saying it's perilous. It's perilous to us to treat Enoch as a reliable source. So what are they calling it? They're saying that it's false. You cannot trust it. That's what they're saying. So this is in the Bible. This is
Well,
in the Bible.
well, yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Here's the thing. You don't really have to argue any of that. You really just the very fact that they're just arguing according to human reasoning, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're just going to do that. There's not, you know, the way that you get through is to people who want to hear and who want to understand. And
Right.
to those people who are actually seeking for the truth, if you show them truth, then they'll accept it because they have, they're the good soil types.
Right,
The
but what I just
when
read,
the thing
what I just read though is as it stands, that's how the current church thinks. Just like as a, it's like in a dead state basically. I'm just like wanted you to read what it said, like so everybody can hear that in the current NIV archaeological Bible, that's where they've left Enoch and Jude as they're not to be like you can even though Jude defended it, the book of Enoch can't be trusted. That's what they're saying. So
uh,
like that's what everybody thinks that right now like in churchianity. That's what they think. I know we don't have to agree with it or think that way or use it, but just so everyone knows, that's what they think. Go ahead, Robert.
Well, the thing is, if you show people ways of reading and you show people ways of thinking, right? That's what this is really about. This is about transcending all of that. I mean, that there are people who are just argumentative by nature, and also they look to authorities as their guide rather than themselves and their own spirit. The people who are saying these things aren't reading these books naively. They're reading them in the context of people who are treating them as cleverly concocted fables and as from the mind of men, right? And so what you can do is you can point out that their methodology and their conclusions are pretty much the same as those of the infiltrators. And you can just draw parallels and say, listen, this person says the same thing as the people that Jude calls wicked and godless and attributes them attributes the prophecy of Enoch to them. You know what I'm saying? In other words, Enoch's prophecy is about them right? When Enoch says that these wicked and godless are to be removed, and then Jude says it was about these men that Enoch wrote when he said, "Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints." You see what I'm saying? In other words, he's wrapping them up in opposition to what the apostles taught, which was that Enoch was ancient, prophetic, authentic, applicable to the people who are entering into the church, and that Jesus was the protagonist of Enoch 1:9, was the figure that was spoken of. So they're retrojecting Jesus Christ into that book. And again, just going back to the fact that Peter is saying that it is our Lord Jesus Christ that we spoke of when we told you about his power and coming, which you are telling us is a cleverly concocted myth, a cleverly concocted fable. But I'm telling you that this did not come from the will of man, right? As you say, this came from the Holy Spirit, says Peter. That's his defense. And when you have that like faith, right, no one can take that from you. So the person who rejects it honestly is almost irrelevant. I mean, because what you're talking apples here and they're talking oranges over there. You're talking consistency. They're talking about let's look at consensus reality. Let's look at what we think. Let's look at what scholarship says. Let scholarship be true at the expense of Jude. Let tradition be true at the expense of Jude. And by extension, the expense of God. So let man be true and God a liar is essentially what they're saying. And they can tell you 5 ways from Sunday. Um, but in all honesty, it's it's just that they're caught up in their way of thinking. And they're caught up in their way of thinking because they're socialized into it. They're taught that those are like the depths of Satan. We talked about this. Remember, you have the synagogue of Satan entering the church, right? And
Yeah.
again,
And then the final thing.
the synagogue had the 24 books. So they
Mhm.
come into the church and they start pushing the idea of the 24 churches, right? And so, or 24 books. And so that gains a foothold in the churches. And so now he has a seat there, right? So a little bit later he has a seat, right? That you in Pergamos are where Satan's seat is, right?
Mhm.
And then he has a whole teaching, right? Which are the depths of Satan, right? And so you've gone from him creeping into the church to him having a place in the church to him having doctrine in the church, right? And then what's the final thing? Is the synagogue of Satan then and its final state has to come and fall down at the feet of the Philadelphians. Those are the ones, again, who have the open door, who have the crown, who do not have the rebuke, whose candlestick has not been removed, right? The idea is that you have the Smyrnians with that and you have the Philadelphians with that, and that the synagogue of Satan runs its full arc from entering into the church to having a seat at the church to having doctrine within the church to having to bow down at the feet of the Philadelphians, right? That's
So
the
that's why
same
the gates of
imagery.
hell. Is that why the
But
gates
that,
of hell can't prevail on the final time, right? Because the
okay.
Philadelphians, right?
Okay, so let's just skip over the astronomical stuff. There in what is that? 40 or
Was that second Enoch though that does that, or is that in the first Enoch too?
about what?
I thought the second Enoch goes over the astrological stuff like more than the first Enoch does, but I was just
Well,
saying
they
that.
both get into it pretty deep, but I was trying to focus on the Son of Man.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. Right,
so
right.
so in man, I really do not like Roman numerals. I think it's 42 here. I don't know why they kept that up. But anyway, it says, Wisdom found no place where she might dwell. Then a dwelling place was assigned her in the heavens, right? And so she had no place on earth, in other words, to dwell, right? And so she had to exist in the heavenly level, right? But wisdom truly exists on both levels. The lower level, again, is for the people who dwell on the earth, for keeping people in line, right? Even Paul says that the law was there, to multiply sins, and that, it was for the sinners and stuff and not for the righteous, because there's a whole other spiritual law that applies in that particular instance, right? So now
Mhm.
you're, above earthly teaching. So, you want to gain that wisdom so that you understand the true meaning of the law. And it says, Wisdom went forth to make her dwelling among the children of men and found no dwelling place. Wisdom returned to her place, right? That is to say, what they were doing was it was planning for the passage of time to be revealed later and then just letting wickedness run amok. Well, not technically amok. There's a definite madness to the method, but don't let it, distract from the fact that there is a method to the madness. There's a mystery of iniquity that
Yeah.
is being allowed to play itself out because the darkness is voiding itself of power. If you lie big and you lie for a long time and everything that you say and do is a really really big really really intricate lie. Again, it says in Enoch 104 105 they're going to write volumes based on their words. These are the doctrines
Yeah.
of Satan, right? And the people that you're talking about, they sit in the seat of Satan, spewing the doctrines of Satan, right? The whole idea is that your argument is better than theirs. God has left his word static and open for 2,000 years. And then somebody comes along with the mind of the child, right, and points out that the emperor's not wearing any clothes, right? But in this particular instance, the emperor has no idea, like has no clue that they're truly naked, before the world. And so what
Yeah.
you do is you show the world, right, with your wisdom, just what it is that they've done. And the fact is that those people that you're talking about and those people who are entering the church, they're just the same people. They have the same mindset. They're yes and no. They're double-minded, right? They say, oh, yes, I believe the Bible. Yes, I believe Jude. No, I don't believe Jude here. No, I don't believe him there. I don't believe them here. You know what I'm saying? That's what you're
Yeah.
telling me, right? So all you're doing is you're just doing what they're doing. They're wild waves of the sea, foaming up their own shame, right? The idea is that a wave is above the whole rest of it. So we're talking about hierarchies, right? So the idea is that these people, again, we've seen the parable, right? The wild waves of the sea, right? Be not blown around by every wind of doctrine. Jesus is the logos, Peter is the church. They're passing across the sea, and the winds, again, the doctrines, they be not blown around by every wind of doctrine, right? They raise up, and the winds, right? These men are like, wild waves of the sea, foaming up their own shape. So you have the infiltrators in the image, you have the false doctrines in the image. You have the logos in the image. You have the church in the form of Peter in the image walking across the sea, which is the age, right? Eyes on the logos, he's able to transcend this age. Paying attention to the winds of doctrine and the infiltrators who are these wild waves of the sea who are unstable in all their ways, like the waves of the sea, as Jane puts it. Same imagery, right? So as long as the church focuses on what they say, they sink down into the water, which is the age, and they become indistinguishable. This is the same kind of imagery where the logos is actually up here on the surface and the church
Mhm.
is down below the water, drowning in it. And the idea is that that which is above and transcends and has no and is not afraid of the winds and the doctrine can still them, right? And then the question is asked once he pulls them out and gets back in the ship, why couldn't you guys do this, right? The idea is that they had it within them to still the winds of doctrines and these wild waves of these infiltrators, right? Had they merely kept their eyes on the logos, right? So when you start seeing this stuff, again, this isn't about believing, you're just plugging it in. Okay, waves, these men are waves, wild waves of the sea. Oh, these are winds of doctrine. We just plug them in. In the beginning was the logos, the word. The word was with God. He is the way, the truth, the life, right? So as long as Peter, the church, upon this rock, I will build my church, right? You're just writing the names like on a meme or something,
I know, I know,
Peter,
I know.
Peter is the
It's
church,
great. No, it's not.
you
It's
know,
not silly too, because like I mean, even the some of the littlest, like silliest verses, like it seemed like when I was growing up in the Bible, I'm like, why does it? I was like, why does it matter that the little children can't go unto him? I don't even get why does Jesus all of a sudden care so much about little kids, and why is the disciples telling them that he can't go to them or whatever? It doesn't make sense.
because
It,
they're the third dispensation. He
yeah, right.
writes to,
No,
and John writes to the fathers, to the young men, and to the children.
right.
The fathers are the Jews, and the Christians are the young men, and the elect are the children. And
Right.
so he's
It's trying to
having
set
to
it.
inform. Well, but he's having to inform the Christians that they have
That's
to
all
overcome the evil one, but that they're going to do it,
Yeah,
right? But he is writing to three generations, right? Because there's different facets to each one. One is like precursive, and one is,
like you actually
intermediate, right? And the other is ultimate, right? So you've
Mhm.
got three different, phases and stages and things to identify the three different pillars, right? Three
Right,
different symbolic objects, right? Moses, the in the tablets in the Ark of the Covenant, right? That
Mhm.
that applies to Moses, right? Aaron's rod. Aaron is the
The high,
Levitical high priest, and
right,
he corresponds to Jesus, which is our spiritual high priest,
right,
right? So that rod, right? Same rod he gives to the Philadelphians, right? The idea that they will rule with the rod of iron, right? So they get a rod too. And then, of course, the hidden manna. The idea is that manna that see that manna is gathered for 6 days or 6,000 years, and it's
right,
put into and it's hidden away in a jar and kept over for the seventh day, which is after the year 2000, sometime.
right.
Depending on where that hits, right?
Yeah,
But the
and these
idea,
books, the apocryphal books are apocrypha means hidden, and Jesus said to him who overcomes, I'll give to eat of the hidden manna. Like it's all throughout the whole entire Bible. It's
yeah.
like insane. It's insane. It's like a
So
secret
anyway,
code or something. It's like an easy secret code that no one knows about.
well, okay, but so now here's the thing. He's going to give the world over to evil. It says unrighteousness went forth. That's 42:3, right? Unrighteousness went forth from her chambers. Who she sought not, she found and dwelt with them, right? And as rain in a desert and as dew on a thirsty land, right? So that's when you're looking out into the world right now and you're thinking it's just hopelessly evil. There's nothing you can do about it. Nobody, nope. I mean, strictly speaking, nobody has to care about this. You can go to the church and tell them this all day long, and they can just tell you to stick it, right? But the point is,
Yeah.
there's a force of truth behind this. And like I said, I don't know that AI specifically plays a role in this. What I do know is that if somebody's appealing to an objective third source, then that can be the objective voice of reason in an argument. I keep waiting
Yeah.
for people to bring AI into their conversations to see what a cool eye could bring. Now, that isn't to say that they all have a cool eye and can see things right down the middle.
Right.
But at some point, there's going to be a sense that this is going to filter because if it's true and it's there and it becomes part of the conversation and it becomes part of the dialogue and it becomes a thing, right? This is one of the things that it both frustrates me and it sort of excites me in a way because I know that I can shout this stuff just as loud as I want to. And it may look like I have a lot of viewers, but a lot of those have just fallen by the wayside. And again, I don't know whether to blame myself or others. All I can tell you is that I'm on my own personal quest, and I'm just trying to share people what I find along the way and what I do along the way and stuff. And hopefully they will see the light and they will follow suit and do things on their own or help out or something. But the idea is that it's going to become it's going to become part of the conversation because it can be pointed out and because it can be articulated and because it can be shown and it can be demonstrated and it is possible to fight for it when you see what it is that it at some point it will become a thing, and at that point then the saints and all these people that will become a thing. There's going to be a tipping point at some point, and that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I
um
know. But yeah, but you gotta, Robert, I'm not trying to like, you know, praise you or anything like that. Like just say you did a good job. But I mean like I gotta say, like, I don't know, maybe for like 3 years straight, I didn't even listen to music. I just listened to the super gospel every single day, all day long, like all day long. And I'm just thankful that you made it because if you didn't make that, I wouldn't know all these intricate things about Jesus, like all his whole childhood, his whole all these things I wanted to know about him. And
Well,
that's just knowing about Jesus as a person. Never mind knowing about the spiritual aspect of Jesus and all the different other things that you've taught me. I mean, I've personally sent with like just my own money, like shooting people Amazon shipments of like the super gospel because they didn't have a way to get it to their house or something. There's thousands of people personally in my own daily life I know that have been blessed by the super gospel. And so if you think, it's not going fast enough, it's not that. It maybe I think I'm just saying this. I don't know if it's true. I'm just saying, but like Jesus said, you'll be one among 1,000 and two among 10,000. There's not. I mean, there out of the a lot of people in the world, there's only going to be a few that come to this. It's just that, out of a few out of, 9 billion is still a couple million people that need to find this knowledge and come to Jesus. You know what I mean? And these types of things, factual things about the book of Enoch and Jude and things can change the mind of atheists and witches and people that might never look at the religion because it's not just religion, it's the truth. You know what I mean? That's just how I feel.
wait,
That's how I feel.
well, I appreciate the support, by the way. I do appreciate that. I could tell you the reason I wrote the super gospel was just so that I could sort it out myself.
Yeah.
Like I said, it started out as a personal project. That's what pretty much everything I do started out as a personal project. All the readings I did, that was before YouTube anyway. That was mostly just me just wanting to have that stuff to listen to while I was doing this, that, and the other, driving around, mowing the lawn, working around the house, just sitting around doing nothing. I would have those things to listen to. And so I tried to read them with a little bit of force and a little bit of meaning so that when I listened to them, I could gain from them, and if I couldn't hear it when I spoke it, I could maybe hear it when I listened to it. And so I tried to do that. And I learned a lot just from listening to it, like you said. And when I worked on the super gospel, it just that was just me, my curiosity run wild. I wanted to see what it looked like, what it would turn into, where the words wanted to go. I did that with the Agrapha. I combined all of the Agrapha with all of Thomas, right? And then I combined that with another gospel that basically is thrown away, but there were enough fragments of it that it actually added to the Agrapha. So I threw that in and just put the words where they wanted to go. And I
Yeah.
was always astonished by the way in which it stood in terms of the words wanted to go in certain places and they wanted to arrange themselves, literally wanted to arrange themselves. It was like I wasn't putting them where I wanted. It was like they wanted to go here. So what happens when you go here? This leads into this saying,
Oh,
and
it
that
had to
saying
be
leads
that
into
though.
that
It had to
saying.
be that though. It's so fluent. It's so fluent. It's scary how fluent it is. I just being honest, like it's scary how fluent it is. It's like
I
it.
would put it up there with, I mean, honestly, the Sermon on the Mount or anything else. I mean, the way that it
Yeah, I
flows. And
know.
again, who do you credit for that? You got to credit the
Holy
mind that
Spirit.
was behind that.
Right.
But how many hands are we talking about? This person over here contributes this. That person over there contributes that. You know what I'm saying? It's just
Yeah,
this.
yeah. It had to be the power of God that did it, right? It's too
Yeah,
much.
it's showing you something beyond the word. That's what I'm trying to tell you. It's
Yeah.
much more than just the sum of its various parts. It is in a lot of ways a very sort of expression of of
Like an
of God's
omnipotent God or
power.
something. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
God's getting out of
I
hand
just,
over here.
that's right. I just think I know we're talking about the metaphoric thing, but I just think it's cool that like like Jesus could talk like when he was a kid and like all the different miracles he did as a kid and
Well,
just things like that.
the, I
It makes
I
me
thought
like
about that too because when you look at the book of Hebrews, again, Hebrews uses the imagery from the ascension of Isaiah that he
Mhm.
passed down through the heavens, right? You
Right,
read
right,
this in the ascension of Isaiah, right? The writer of Hebrews, if it's Paul or whoever, is very in touch with um non-canonical writings.
right.
Does give a shout out. And what's interesting is that to that, just as a side note, this is a chapter 11, which is the chapter of faith, right? Faith is the substance of things, whatever.
Yeah.
And then you're not even outside of chapter 11 in the book of Hebrews. You're not even out of the chapter of faith, and he's talking about the woman who would receive her children in the next life, which is a reference to the second book of
Maccabees.
Maccabees, right? Or when he
Yeah.
talks about the prophets being sawn in two, right? That's with reference to the
The section of Isaiah.
martyrdom of Isaiah. And
Yeah.
so you're reading in the chapter of faith, you're reading about two non-canonical writings, right? And you ask yourself how you could just not get out of the chapter of faith without denying that, whoever wrote this was giving a shout out to books that we no longer accept, right? This is what I'm saying. This is what's unacceptable from the church. And again, it isn't really for me to say, but the scriptures are saying it. It's totally unacceptable for them to to place themselves ahead of the prophets and to place themselves ahead of God. You know what I'm saying? And their words ahead of the words of the prophets. You know what I'm saying? It's very
Yeah.
presumptuous on their part. And you can see kind of the setup in this. You can see where all this is going to lead at some point, which is to say that certain questions could be asked and certain answers might not be possible to give in response to those questions, right? And so if you see the writing on the wall like that, you understand that these guys are walking into a pretty heavy trap. If they're going to maintain, especially in the face of knowledge, if they're going to maintain the status quo or the religion as it's been handed down. What I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because we're pivoting to something else entirely. We're going from believing to seeing. The way
Yeah.
again, the way to that knowledge lies through virtue. I keep saying it, but it's the truth. When you have the virtue to credit them, that's all it takes. It takes a little tiny bit of strength. That's what's spoken to the Church of the Philadelphians. Because you have a little bit of strength, right?
Mhm.
I will keep you from the trials that are going to come, upon the children of men, which means
Mhm.
that they're going to be after the trials. They're going to come at the end. Those are the elect ones we were just now talking about. Those are
Yeah.
the Philadelphians, right? That their
Mhm.
seed was kept apart because if they had been 500 years sooner, 1,000 years sooner, somebody would have blabbed the truth,
Yeah.
right? So the people who know the truth have to be held back. That's the generation you're talking about. And those are the ones who are coming with the logos. That is to say,
Mhm.
they're bringing you the true meaning, right? And the thing is, it's not just that they're bringing you books, right? What are the books the payoff for, right? The books are the payoff for crediting the scriptures and the authors of the scriptures, right? And so when you credit Jude, what do you get? You get the book of Enoch. When you credit Jude, unfortunately we don't have it, but the assumption of Moses, at least you have the knowledge from that or the benefit from that of knowing that um that
Well, can I just say this, Robert, real quick? I don't want to get into this. I'm not gonna. I promise I will not get further down a rabbit hole. But Enoch does create a problem in Christianity, and it has to do with the rapture. And I'm not going to get into the rapture, but the reason it causes the problem is because Enoch says that that we will be living in the days when the wicked and the ungodly are removed from the earth. So if the wicked and the ungodly are removed from the earth, and all these people say that we get raptured out of here, then there's not going to be anybody left on the earth, basically, right? I mean, that's true, right? Because if you take the wicked out, and then like currently the church system says that we're raptured and we leave, but that's not the way that the book of Enoch tells it. It's just a fact. So if you put the book of Enoch back into the religious system, all the people that have books out there talking about the book of Revelation and we're raptured out, we don't have to go through all these problems that happen on the earth and all this stuff. That's like it would destroy current like Western Christian thought. I'm just saying it would. It's like and I'm only mentioning this because I had a full on length discussion with Chat GPT about this, and it says that the book of Enoch is true, and it will make the current rapture scenario that they tell everybody, which only came about in the 19th century, that it will destroy all that.
Well, you have to understand what the tribulation is. The tribulation is the 2,000 year period. People
Hmm.
think that
The
it's
entire time. Hmm.
something that's coming. It's something that we've been in, and it's something that we've
Right.
been dealing with for 2,000 years. And what you have is the antidote. What you have for that is you have the truth delivered. And the truth is delivered through the agency of the elect who are here on this earth, bringing it to other people and showing
Right.
them the truth. So, whatever you get out of that, see, I don't like bringing up what's not inherently there in the words because when people talk about and there are a lot of tangents and a lot of rabbit holes that people go down. And the thing that I don't like about that, and part of it is just because getting to the bottom of this, that's my thing. I'm not worried about,
Yeah. Oh, I know all the
other
other stuff
kinds of
is just.
rabbit holes. I'm looking for the logical presentation of the truth. What we're told to do here is to reveal it to the world. You know what I'm saying? When that's your directive, and you know that you've been given that directive by the New Testament itself, because Jude and Peter are fighting for the faith that it's also telling us to fight for, right?
Well,
And that,
well, you mentioned the fact the reason I mentioned what I mentioned, the only reason I brought it up, it wasn't for the rapture part of it. The reason I brought up what I said is because it says that Jesus will come with 10,000 upon 10,000 of his saints. But where did they come from is my point. My point is that the saints, they all went to the underworld because Adam and all this, everybody from Adam to the thief on the cross went to the underworld and had to be like saved by Jesus, right? So once they came out of the underworld and then went to paradise, as they're leaving and they go to paradise, Enoch and Elijah are right there, and they say all the saints say to Enoch and Elijah, "Why were you not down in the underworld with us, waiting for Jesus to come and save us?" And they said, we were already taken up to paradise. We were raptured basically and went to paradise. We're the only two people that ever happened to. And then you read Peter and it says, every man lives once and then the judgment. So wouldn't it make sense that Enoch and Elijah would be the two people at the end of time that fight the Antichrist because they're the only people that never died besides those other people? You see what I'm saying?
well, it,
No,
it
the reason I'm bringing this up is because the saints that come at the end of time, the 10,000 saints, they're those people that were saved by Jesus in the Gospel of Nicodemus, is what I'm saying. So, in essence, the whole entire cycle of Jesus saving them, the Adam and the thief, and then also saving us in the future, all has to depend on the fact that Jesus saved those people at the beginning. You see what I'm saying? It was like a promise that he gave to Adam in the beginning. Then he comes and he saves all those people. Then they become the saints that are waiting in heaven that then come back with him at the end. You see what I'm saying? But they don't teach you that in the current system, is all I'm saying. Is like they don't teach you the way that even Jude and Enoch talk about it in the Bible. That's not, they don't teach it that way. Anyways, go ahead.
well, the teaching of the harrowing of hell or whatever is really taught in the New Testament. Like it's a thing. You read Matthew 27, they did come up out of their graves and show themselves to the people after an earthquake. And
Yeah.
he talks about the preaching to the spirits in prison, right? That all is definitely in the vein of the teaching and the harrowing of hell. In the
Yeah,
book
but
of
they just push it
Revelation,
away. It's just like,
he has the keys. Well, yeah, in the book of Revelation, he has the keys of
yeah,
hell and
me
of,
too. I
of
know.
death. And the idea that he has conquered them and that he has placed the cross, and that you find that in the Odes of Solomon, you find that in the Sibylline oracles, you find that just all kinds of different places here and there. So the dissensus is something that's very well attested to, and all of the stuff that you're talking about, as far as Enoch and Elijah, there's an applicability to it in the real world, and there's also an applicability to it in spiritual space, because in spiritual space, in metaphorical space, what we have in the underworld is we have essentially the world of darkness, which is metaphorically where we all live. We have a metaphorical place of death, which again is metaphorically where we all are, if you see it on that level as well. and not trying to spirit it away because there's a lot of concrete stuff even in the New Testament. So I'm
Yes.
just saying you've got to see it
Yeah.
on both of
There's
its
levels to it.
levels because
Mhm.
in the context where it happens to deal with us, the reason why Enoch and Elijah are both significant and symbolic and why they have to be held back is because the spirit and power of Elijah is what's spoken of. That John the Baptist, for example, came in the spirit and power of Elijah, but there's also an Elijah who is to come, again in spirit and in power.
Mhm.
And in the flesh, well, maybe, but the significance of it is in the spirit,
Yeah.
because see, then Enoch also is the scribe, and a scribe that was held back by his own words until the end,
Right.
that he was going to be, returned and restored as a blessing to them. And so, by virtue of the spirit and power of Elijah and the writing of Enoch, you're able to penetrate the mystery, you see, because you have the writings and you have the spirit and you have the power at his coming, that you, the elect, are going to come along with him. Now, if there's a physical rapture or something, I mean that again, that's
Yeah,
I'd
but
have to see. I'd
I'm
have
not
to see where it's
I'm not
actually
mentioning
written,
it.
is what I'm
I'm not
saying.
mentioning it as if like I care about it. I'm mentioning it as because it's very, very prevalent in the systems. Like you don't get it, Robert. I don't mean to be a jerk. I'm just saying like you don't get it. I have gone to I don't know how many like 50 different churches growing up. My parents would just drag me to like a Baptist one this week and a Southern Baptist one the next week and like a Pentecostal the next week for my whole life. So I've gone to so many different church services where they just tell you the same regurgitated thing, and it's sickening to be honest. Like it's that sickening. So when I say these things and I mention the rapture, it's because there's people that are going to be watching this with me and you talking. And when I mention that, they're in the background, you can't hear them, but I guarantee you they're saying, "Yep, I know it. That's what they talk about."
Well,
And
what
no, it's
happens
not
is
true.
what happens is you can talk about any subject, any kind of rabbit hole, no matter what you're talking about, right? You got rabbit hole A, you got half the people on this side of it, and half people on the other side of it, right?
Yeah,
And then you start going down that rabbit hole, right? You're losing half your people, right? And then you got another rabbit hole over here. Let's talk about this other subject, right? And you got half the people believing it and half people not believing it, right? And then
yeah,
what you're doing is you're saying, okay, well, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna die on this hill over here, and you're losing half your people.
right.
I'm trying to stand on things that are defensible and can be agreed upon. You know what I'm saying? But again, because there's so many things, that so many different sort of sidetracks that you can go down. You know what I'm saying? Even though
Yeah,
they're
but
interrelated in
I
some
don't mention
ways,
it for
they are
I don't
still.
mention it for like for that so much is that it's just the fact that the rapture thing it makes so much of the church asleep. You know what I mean? They're so asleep thinking that they're gonna get out of here and not have to deal with anything. But the Book of Enoch talks about how we're gonna be here till the end. Like Zen talks about this too in a lot of his shows too. Zen Garcia. He talks about the fact that because of the rapture the lie of the rapture. It's made a lot of people not even think that Enoch could be possible as a book to read because Enoch talks about how we're going to be here till the very last second.
Well,
We're going to have to suffer through the things that the early Christians had to suffer through. And so every people in the modern Christian church, they want to escape all that and they want to just get a free get out of jail free pass and go straight directly to heaven without having to deal with any of it. And Enoch is the exact opposite of that, and it details in very strict guidelines how we are going to have to go through all these different things in the end times. And I'm just saying, if the book is true, then most of Christian thought is incorrect right now. Most of the church is incorrect if Enoch is true. That's all I'm saying.
this revelation is the kind of the point.
Mhm.
The ability to see what the apostles actually taught at first is really the holy grail of all Christian knowledge. It is the most sacred and the most holy and the most sought after truth is to recognize what the apostles actually taught versus what we were told they were taught. And so the idea is to pull people out of a fog and out of a confusion and into a more clear and a more solid understanding. The doctrines of the past, whatever they may be, um, are at
Yeah,
best
I know
are
what
at
you're saying.
best
No,
a
like you don't even.
half-baked
You're
mis.
saying we don't even have to talk about the rapture because it's like it's totally
Well,
beyond the point. We're past that. It's like is that what you're saying? It's like why even bother talking about
Well, I
it?
mean, why not just talk about anything? Why not just talk about, football or something? I mean, I'm trying to make his
I
way
would say I would
straight.
say because
We're
I would
trying
say
to
because
we're
I would say
we're
that
trying to
I mentioned that because like 70% of like any Christian that you would tell
well
this like it would mention that and be like, well, Enoch says that we're gonna stay here till the end and or whatever, and then like I'm just saying that's what they
what
say. So what we don't have to talk about it. It's
what
just that's what they're gonna say.
what
So
we're
I'm
trying
trying to, I guess I'm trying to like think of things like that I could say to people when they come back at me, like saying I don't want to read Enoch because of this, this, and this, and I'm like, well, okay, and I don't know how to defend it. Is all I'm saying.
we want to make his ways straight. We want to try to demonstrate what can be shown. What are the consequences of taking them at their word and just follow that logic and just keep pursuing that logic and keep growing in it and keep finding more and more about it and to just become a light. And then you don't see the whole thing about it is conflict has its place, right? But what has to come first is you have to find the rest. You have to find that stable center that you can grab onto and understand that this much is absolutely defensible, absolutely understandable. And what we're talking about here is something like a deed to the earth, saying that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and we're here to claim it in his name, you know what I'm saying, on his behalf, based on what the apostles honestly taught. And we're here to expose the lie before the world that the apostles held the same paradigm as what has been taught for 2,000 years. I can demonstrate to you that their paradigm, that their worldview, that their view of Jesus as the Enochian Messiah is in fact a thing. And it is in fact universalized among the apostles themselves, that they're attributing it to themselves and to others within the confines of the books that you believe. And this is the judgment that stands against the church. You know what I'm saying? And there's a lot of ways you can go with a lot of other things, but what I'm saying is that you grab this thread and you keep pulling on this thread because you keep getting more thread as you pull, and you unravel this this thing that's been going on for 2,000 years just by pulling on this one thread. You know what I'm saying? It
Yeah, no, I get what
to
you're saying,
get
Robert. Robert,
bogged down.
there's something that like there's God put you on this earth for a very specific reason because you follow this logic so tightly that like I cannot fathom how tightly you stay on track. You are the only person I know that can stay on track so well. I cannot do it. Like I wish that I knew how. It's just that sometimes when people ask me questions, because people do ask me a lot of questions about God. And so I like they'll ask me about stuff according to the rapture when I mentioned the book of Enoch. Like somebody just did it the other day. I told you one of my customers, they asked me about the book of Enoch and stuff like that. So like I'm just trying to relate it to people how they relate it to me. And I don't know how to do it the way that you do it, where you stay on track. I take it from like where they take me, like, okay, they take me there and then I bring it back to it. But you're saying don't do that. So I'm trying to figure out how to do it the way you do it. I'm not good at it. It's all. It's
Well,
all.
you're out in the streets and you're rubbing elbows with people. That's more or less your approach. My approach is I more or less sit back and quiet and think about it or listen to it or you look into it, or you know what I'm saying? I do quiet sort of study. But what I'm saying is it's just something that keeps on giving. You just keep on
I
going with it.
I think I'm doing it wrong. What I'm saying is
No,
that
well, I didn't say that. I think what
no, I
you're
do, I
reaching
do.
out to
I'm
people. People
saying
have to
what
be
you
reached out to.
no, what you're doing is correct because you're staying on topic, which is taking it to the heavenly aspect, and I shouldn't even bother entertaining these side tangent things that people bring up. I should just bring it back to what we're talking about. You're right, and I apologize. It's my fault. It's hard not to
Well,
because I come from a
it
religious background, so it's very difficult. It's so difficult. I
well,
know.
and when I was an atheist, my thing was that I would spar with them. My own point of view, though, I was sure that I was right, was that they were wasting their lives. I thought
Yeah,
that by disabusing them of their, fairy tale fantasies, that was my point of view, that they were throwing away their lives, that there was so much to live for if you could just think for yourself and, you know, learn how to transcend all of this acquired thought that you
yeah,
could be free from it, right? I
yeah,
mean, not everybody's so, detached from reality and so happy go lucky that that comes easy to them, right? But, that was my path in life to a large extent,
yeah,
that I just was insular and I kept myself that way. But at first, when I was arguing with atheists, right, one of the things that happened to me eh, as an atheist that almost made me laugh out loud was back when I was in school. I had this roommate who was Catholic, had one of those big old like 3 foot thick Bibles that you put on your coffee table, right? With the lenticular thing on the front cover, you
yeah,
know. Anyway, and so I was sparring with Christians at the time, and I was trying to look for the table of contents, and I saw this book like the Maccabees and Wisdom and stuff. And I'd been to church a few times, and just read the Bible and the table of contents because I sure wasn't going to listen to the guy as he talked, right? Because I mean,
yeah,
he was going to go on for 45 minutes, and I didn't really have the attention span or the interest, right? But I remember there not being a book of Maccabees in my Bible. I remember there not being a book of wisdom in my Bible. So I asked the guy, straight up, what are all these books here? I've never heard of these, right? And he's
yeah,
like, oh yeah, I'm a Catholic. We have more books than Protestants, right? And he told me that like just like he was saying that the sky is blue, water is wet, we have different books, like
yeah,
as if that wasn't a thing, right? And when I heard it, I just about laughed, right? I was like, you kidding me, right? You kidding me? You guys have different Bibles? Are you serious? Right?
yeah,
How in the world are you ever going to get it together? If you talk about a non-starter, you talk about something that just immediately occurred to me that how ridiculous that was. You cannot be serious. Are you telling me that you don't even when you say the Bible and the other guy says the Bible, there is no the Bible. You got your Bible and they got their Bible. What are you talking about, right? You can't be serious, right? But like they couldn't see through the absurdity of that. They couldn't understand the ridiculousness of that. And that was part of what almost got me believing in God, right? Because I would think that only God could pull off this level of like people are this stupid and I can show it to you in like, just
yeah,
this one little example, right? These people they can't possibly be right. Under such a system, right? You got all of these divergent church, right? None of them really give you the mysteries. None of them really give you the truth. Some of them try to, but there are all these different denominations. I don't care to go into that because I don't really want to alienate people. What I'm saying is you don't need to. You don't need to alienate people because you eat what they place before you and you heal the sick among them, right? They place before you a 66 books. You say, okay, I can heal the sick among them, the spiritually sick, right? From the food, the spiritual food, the 66 that they placed before me. Jesus did the same thing with the scribes and the Pharisees, right? The Sadducees, right? They only believe in the Torah, right? So when the Sadducees ask Jesus a question, he answers them from the Torah. He eats from their food, right? That they have on their table, right? And he heals the sick among them, what I'm saying, using the food or the scriptures that they eat or the scriptures that they believe and they nourish themselves from, right? And then with the Pharisees, right, he would talk to them out of the Tanakh. He would bring in Daniel. I'm saying he code shifted.
yeah.
And so when he was with Judas and he was with Peter and he was with all of them, he code shifted further still. By the way, this talk about the Son of Man, right? We're not to talk about it outside of this room, right? But I'm going to disclose to you that I am the Enochian Son of Man. And Jude is there and Peter is there. They're all hearing it, right? And this is the legacy that they're fighting for, is they're trying to keep the actual, I don't even want to call it a secret teaching. It's right there out in the open. It's the Lord that cometh with 10,000 saints. It's the Lord that's spoken of in the book of Enoch. So says Jude. That should be enough just in and of itself. But again, it's in the mouths of two or three witnesses. So now we have Jude and a book that's written around Jude to back up Jude. And to, you know what I'm saying? So structurally, what you have is you have Jude saying something, and then you got Peter who's got Jude's back. And they're both telling you that you have to achieve a like faith as what they had, right? And again, once you identify what their faith is, then you make your faith like their faith. They believe in Enoch, you believe in Enoch. They place Enoch as the protagonist of the book of or they put Jesus as the protagonist. You put in there, right? And then what happens, right? See, that's where the virtue comes in. That's the virtue added to your faith. Then you
Mhm.
receive knowledge, and then you start the path to godliness, right? And brotherly kindness, right? That's when you start to begin to partake of the divine nature that Peter says, right? We just talked about that in the parable. They will have a light, right? That again, a light shall appear to the righteous and the elect who dwell on the earth, right? So they're beginning to partake of the divine nature. Something shifts inside of you when you recognize that you're living in a world that isn't at all what it seems like. It's not these people that you're arguing with, right? As far as that goes, again, it's well intentioned, but the problem is you're once you descend into argument, you're arguing. You're talking about this, that, and the other, yes and no, right? When in fact all you really have to do is to affirm, right? What
Mhm.
I'm affirming is this is what they taught. This is what they showed. These are their words. Let me point to what they said. Let's reach down into their writings and look at what they're saying from the point of view of this particular insight. What is this particular insight? Well, again, the book is about Jesus. And that the books that you have, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, right? And whatever others you might believe, if they're on the same page and they're talking about the same thing, they're also telling you that Jesus is the Enochian figure. He's the Enochian Christ. And so that's the insight. Then you understand how they denied his name, right? Because again, the Enochian Christ as a name has been denied to us. You see it, you perceive it, you come to recognize it in the writing, and to when somebody argues like they have an opinion and they argue from an opinion and the opinion is subjective based on their experience, based on their thought, based on their disposition, based on what they've been pounded into their head or whatever, things that they recognize, things that they don't recognize, things that they thought about, things that they hadn't thought about. You can lose all of that stuff just by hanging on to the thread, is all I'm saying. You just follow where the Lord goes, and you don't look to the winds, and you don't look to the waves. You look straight to the logos, and
Well,
then you
it's just
can
just that
transcend
like
it on.
I don't know if you know this or not, but like when you're in a sales job, when you're in a sales job at the beginning, they give you a script, and when you're talking to somebody on the phone, you read the script, and then you get to like maybe the third part of the script, and then they'll throw like a curveball at you, and it's something that you don't know how to answer or whatever. So I might be telling them about Enoch and Jude and how to go through Peter and figure it all out and stuff like that, explaining the way that we're talking about it right now. And then they throw something in about the rapture, or they throw something in about this, or they throw something in about that. So it's just like something that I like. If they talk about it, I do know some things about it from a churchianity type perspective because I grew up in it, and then I just bring it back to this stuff. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just saying that like people do bring these things up in the world like as topics. I'm not saying I dwell on it. It's just like sometimes you need to know like, okay, well this is what it is, and this is like and bring it back to it. You know what I mean? It's possible to do that. It's just that people do have arguments already in this time and age about the Book of Enoch. They know about it. They've watched a couple of YouTube videos quickly about it. They know a couple things about it. But like I said before, they might have false information about Enoch. They might think he's the firstborn of Cain, which did magic and stuff, which he's not that same Enoch. That's why Jude says Enoch seventh from Adam. It tells you who he is in the lineup because whatever. We don't use Cain's line as the lineage from Adam because if you did use Cain's line, you would make that would make Enoch eighth from Adam, not seventh from Adam, because Cain is from the cursed seed. But anyways, uh, that should be good for tonight. Robert, we can do another one about the same thing because we only got through I think like what chapter two or something in the book of Enoch. So if you want, we could just go through more of it and show how the keys are in,
Well, we
if you
can
go
move
through it.
on to the second parable, maybe next time. I was hoping
Yeah,
we'd have some time to get to that tonight, but you'll see in that one how much more specific it is with regards to that. So if anybody wants to get ahead of the game, just read the second parable with the eyes that you've been given, and if you see it and recognize it, you know what I'm saying, and you follow the logic, then of course, you know what I'm saying, then you can get to the point where you can articulate it. And then, you know what I'm saying, more and more doors will open up to you as you do it.
yeah, awesome. Well, thank you, Robert, for taking the time out to do this. I appreciate it.
Well, it's so much more than an honor to be able to say these kinds of things, you know, to be able to articulate what's here. You know, I just pray for more and more people to see it and to do it and to participate in it. You know, so many other things have caught on, you know, and have you know, filtered through the the ether here, you know, and I'm still waiting for this to happen. It's happening in a very sort of broad kind of way.
Yeah,
But again, people accept things on a subjective dimension. Like, I like it, I believe it, therefore, and to me, it is true. What you
right.
want to be able to do is to say that God has given the enemy into our hands and that we can lay claim to this world, and here's how we do it. And that's a little bit more productive because it actually can bring in the age that it speaks of because it's self-fulfilling. It's once you identify it as true, then it becomes something you recognize rather than something you believe or have faith in. It's something you see, something you hear, something you recognize, something you can articulate. That's when you know you've got it because in a lot of ways it's got you. You know,
Right.
you recognize it. You don't just intuit it, you see it.
Well, thank you, Robert. I appreciate it.
All right. It's been a pleasure.
All right, I'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Good night. God bless.
You too. Bye.